I now want to bring in one of the writers of the Time magazine piece, Charlotte Alter, and that's guns and individuals' rights to own them, this being one of the big debates here as part of the fabric of American politics. And the magazine article that I was alluding to is this, that there are an estimated 265 million guns in the U.S. They are owned by 30% of the adult population. Of note, 3% of households own half of all the guns in America. 57% of voters believe guns are too easy to buy, and only 35% think more people carrying guns would make America safer. That from the Time magazine article. Almost also, all American voters, 94%, including 93% of Republicans, support background checks for all buyers. Despite the support for these so-called common sense solutions, there's been little progress on passing any sort of meaningful gun control legislation over the last decade. Now, following the deadly attack in Las Vegas, congressional leaders are reviewing the bump fire stock modification that can make legal semi-automatic weapons fire like machine guns. As I was mentioning earlier, one of the authors there, Charlotte Alter, of that Time magazine piece that I was just listing some details from, joins us, along with political reporter for NPR, Scott Detrow, and politics editor at TheRoot.com, and MSNBC political contributor, Dr. Jason Johnson. Charlotte, you penned this article. We went through some of the details that you brought out in it. For you, as the author of this, what stands out? By the way, very good piece for those who haven't written it yet. What stands out for you?
I mean, one of the things that stands out is that, you know, in some ways we've been at this place after almost every shooting. There's always a moment of what can come of this, will anything happen? The thing that seems different this time around is that there actually does seem to be some consensus that bump stocks, the device that allows semi-automatic weapons to function essentially as automatic weapons, that those are a problem. And what's interesting is that it's not just Democrats saying that. You have some Republicans on board, and you even have the NRA saying that they would support more regulation on this type of device.
And it seems here, Dr. Jason Johnson, Jason, as you look at this, that both sides are coming together, at least that's what we're hearing so far, against bump fire stocks, that they are going to do something, although the calendar is a little bit nebulous in terms of when they might vote on it. Do you think they're going to make it through to eliminate this accessory for guns that basically give you an efficacy or a fire rate 60% of automatic weapons?
Here's the catch. You know, basically the Republicans, who are pretty much against most forms of gun control, they pretty much just put their ears to the ground to see what the NRA says. And the NRA didn't say you could make these illegal, didn't say ban them. The NRA said additional regulation might be something that's okay. We don't know what that means. We don't know if that means that you're going to have to go through a background check to get one of these bump stocks. We don't know if that just means you have to be of a certain age. So it's still not a clear indicator that some sort of actually positive difference-making legislation is going to occur. And to me, this is akin to like in the 70s where they said, let's increase the filters in cigarettes. Cigarettes were still dangerous. It didn't matter if you changed the filter. So this one thing and what seems to be some sort of work on this issue doesn't change the overall problem of mass shootings in America.
Scott, also part of what the NRA said is they're pointing towards the ATF, not Congress. Congress should be the body that, of course, describes and articulates and then passes the laws that might affect bump fire stocks here. Right. Does this give you a bit of pause that we might see a bipartisan move on bump stocks here?
Yeah, I think we're still several steps from that. It certainly was really notable that a lot of Republicans came out over the course of the week and said they'd be open to the idea of banning bump stocks. Now you see a bill moving from Carlos Curbelo of Florida that's going to be bipartisan that would do that, though the details of it are still being worked out over the weekend. But you're right, the NRA didn't say, and we endorse a bill and we endorse a ban. They said they want the executive branch to take a look, and they still said in that statement that they are very much against the idea of any sort of restriction on weapons, saying that would not stop a mass shooting. So despite all this Republican openness to a bump stock ban, you still do have high-profile Republicans like Steve Scalise, who, as we all know, was the victim of a mass shooting earlier this year, expressing skepticism about the idea of a bump stock ban.
And then Charlotte, you know, I was looking at an LA Times article out today that said, you know, it depends which Donald Trump also shows up on gun control. And this back and forth of Donald Trump goes back 2 decades, depending on which writings you do look at here. Do you think, though, what we're seeing, as Ron Allen was reporting, as the vice president now hits ground there, that Las Vegas might force the president to move a little bit more away, move towards, gun control?
Well, I think you have 2 things happening. First of all, I completely agree the NRA's statement did not come out explicitly in support of banning these things. Essentially, the way I read it was a signal that for Republicans who do vote for a bump stock ban, the NRA is not going to go after them in the primaries in the way that they would, you know, for Republicans who might vote for a broader gun control measure. As far as Trump goes, you know, one other thing to remember about this is that Trump loves law enforcement, and there actually is significant law enforcement support for some common sense gun regulations. You know, there has been a major part of the law enforcement community that's come out against concealed carry reciprocity. So, you know, Trump really takes a lot of cues from law enforcement. You saw in Las Vegas, he was extremely deferential to the law enforcement community. It was among, you know, his top priority to be in touch with them. So I think if you see, you know, significant law enforcement support behind new regulations on bump stocks and other types of devices like this, I think that there's actually a possibility that he could be convinced to get on board. I
want to play this from Representative John Lewis, who spoke with Joy Reid earlier today about gun legislation. Let's listen to that, and I'll get your thoughts here on that, Jason.
Have courage. Be unafraid. Do your job. Bring common sense gun control legislation to a vote. We need it, and we need it now.
Okay, that was not with Joy Reid, but again, John Lewis did speak with Joy Reid on this topic, and you get sort of the movement and the idea from the representative. Jason, when a civil rights leader, an icon like that, stands up, we've seen folks like John Lewis do this, but it doesn't work. Might it work this time?
Oh, no, that's not going to work at all, because no one's going to change. Look, there's a core issue here. You have a large number of Americans who believe that they are fundamentally allowed to have any kind of gun that they want. And they believe that they should have access to guns in a way that we don't look at anything else, right? Like, everybody says that we should have a car. No one believes that Americans should be able to buy tanks unless you're, like, in a Master P video or something. But for some reason, Americans seem to think that you should be able to have everything from a handgun to a machine gun. And unless a vast swath of intense single-issue voters change their mind on this issue, it doesn't matter what John Lewis says. It doesn't matter what some Republican leaders say. It doesn't matter what the polls say. Republicans in Congress will not change on this issue. So whether it's children dying in a high school or an inner-city school or a suburban school or people at a concert, right, I don't see any change coming.
Scott, quickly to you on this Josh Abbott band, who was there. It was one of the bands during that catastrophe in that concert. Caleb Keeter, one of the guitarists, saying, "I've changed my mind on gun control after being a supporter of gun ownership for decades." He's saying we now need to do something. When we see country stars like that in group, en masse, making a move and a change like that, might this change the argument and the discussion?
No, I just don't know. I mean, I don't know what is fundamentally different about this latest round of terrible, horrific mass shooting that hasn't been different from previous ones. The conversation has focused on the idea of a bump stock, and we don't even know if there's going to be bipartisan support to do something on that. Big picture, that's really on the margins of the much broader proposals that we've seen in recent years. So I just think it'd be really hard to see a fundamental shift, again, especially when you have a Senate, a House, and a White House all controlled by a Republican Party where this is a key issue.
All right, Scott Detrow, Charlotte Alter, Jason Johnson, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.